everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 murderous main characters. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. And today's video came about because I have been reading Crime and Punishment recently and thinking about the different things that crime fiction owes to Crime and Punishment. The main one and the thing that I most liked in this was the fact of the main character as a murderer. It got me to thinking about 5 of the best murderous main characters. Now, the murderous main character is not a recent idea, certainly not, and probably largely is influenced by Crime and Punishment. But there have been some undoubtedly very interesting takes on this over the years, and today I wanted to share with you 5 of my favourites. So, caveat to this video, I have not included murderous main characters where revealing them as the murderer would be a massive plot spoiler. So that rules out any books where we don't know who the murderer is initially. These are all books where the main character is very much an anti-hero. Some of these characters we do end up rooting for, in my opinion, and others maybe not so much. So I had to pick a top 5 murderous main characters that didn't spoiler the book. In putting this list together, I thought of 2 other very famous books with leading men that are murderers, but I haven't chosen either of these 2 for my top 5. And I'm going to tell you what they are and why before we get into the 5. One of these mentions has to go to American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. I read this book quite some time ago, but I haven't selected Patrick Bateman as one of my top murderous main characters because he's a bit much. If you've read American Psycho, I'm sure you have an opinion on it. Let me know what that is in the comments if you like. But personally, for me, Patrick Bateman was a lot. This book is like one giant trigger warning, and I am not particularly triggered by graphic violence, graphic murders, but this one is very extreme. Although I wouldn't say I was bothered by it as such, I definitely didn't love reading this book because it was just very horrible to read, I would say, and probably not a book that I would necessarily revisit unless I had a good reason to. So I've left Patrick Bateman out of my top 5 murderous main characters because he is not a murderer I could ever really get on board with or enjoy his story particularly. So the second one is another very controversial book, The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. I read this book such a long time ago that the details are very, very hazy for me, but a lot of people name this as one of their most disturbing books of all time, possibly their most disturbing. And the murderous main character in question in this one is Frank Kaldheim, and he is a 16-year-old, and this book is told from his perspective, and it is a very disturbing book. However, I did like this book. If you asked me my opinion on The Wasp Factory, I would say it's a good book. However, I felt when I was looking at these, I read this one too long ago, and I just felt that this one was a little bit too disturbing to make this list. Again, it is one massive trigger warning. Obviously, with a video on murderous main characters, there's going to be some not very nice anti-heroes here. You may find aspects of them disturbing. So I have a really firm top 3 in mind with murderous main characters, but making up a place at number 5, I have Tom Ripley. Tom Ripley is the main character really in The Talented Mr. Ripley, which was published in 1955 and is by Patricia Highsmith. Ripley actually has an entire series and I've only read this first one, so it was followed by, I believe, Ripley's Game, Ripley Underground, The Boy Who Followed Ripley. Patricia Highsmith wrote a few books about this character, and I would say that I almost didn't count Tom Ripley because he is far more to me of a manipulator than a murderer. Like, manipulation is what springs to mind when I think of like the criminal mindset of Tom Ripley. But if you've read this book or seen this film, you will know that Ripley does take things very far. I would say that that is not a spoiler, because in the blurb it does say Ripley wants money, success and the good life, and he's willing to kill for it. So Ripley to me is a very interesting character, and this is a great work of crime fiction. I would say that Tom is unlikable. I would very much like to read the rest of Highsmith's novels about Ripley and find out what happens next with him. I think he's a fascinating character, and that's why I've put him at number 5 on this list. So in at number 4, another book I read a very long time ago, so a bit hazy on lots of details, but this was a really favourite book at the time that I read it. I'd never read anything like this before and found it hugely, hugely intriguing and fascinating. This is the character of Jean-Baptiste Grenouille in the book Perfume by Patrick Suskind, and this was published in 1985. It follows an orphaned boy in the 18th century in France who is absolutely obsessed with smell, and he has a very overdeveloped sense of smell, and this leads him down a very, very dark path. And the key concept of the book is that he murders people for their scent. Grenouille was a fascinating character to follow. This is an extremely dark book with obviously extremely dark themes. This book goes to all sorts of crazy places, so yeah, approach with caution, but I really, really enjoyed the book Perfume overall, despite the darkness. It's one that I probably will revisit again at some point, and Jean-Baptiste Grenouille is an absolutely terrifying character to join this list of murderers. In at number 3, my top 3 that I was very, very certain of before researching the video. 2 of these books are very notable for the fact that they deal with first-person perspectives where we are actually inside the mind of a murderer. And that is something that I actually do enjoy reading if it's done well, and I think that there are probably a lot of books I have missed that also have this feature. So if you do have recommendations for me for more murderous main characters at the end of the video, please do let me know in the comments. In at number 3 we have a very famous book about a murderer, The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson. And it says on the front here, probably the most chilling and believable first-person story of a criminally warped mind I have ever encountered. And that was a quote from Stanley Kubrick. Thompson writes really interesting crime novels, and I've read one other. I think it's called Pop 1280, and that one also incorporates similar themes. In this 1952 novel by Jim Thompson, we follow Lou Ford, the deputy sheriff of a small Texas town, who, as it turns out, through his first-person narrative, is actually a depraved sociopath. What he gets up to and how we see the insight of his own mind was fascinating to me, and I think this is a classic on the subject for a reason. So yeah, if you are into books that take you inside the mind of really scary people, then I would recommend The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson. It's an absolute classic of this sort of niche subgenre. In at number 2, I would say this is the one on the list that isn't really a crime novel, and that is a book that I have frequently said is my favourite book of all time, and that is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. And our murderous main character in A Clockwork Orange, which was published in 1962, is Alex. A Clockwork Orange was famously made into a film, which was then banned, and so this is a book that is very controversial, as is the film. For me, I have long thought of this book as my favourite of all time because of the language. So this is told in Nadsat, sort of a slang spoken by main character Alex in a near future dystopia. So again, this is a first person narrative. It's told in a very different sort of language, and I really enjoyed getting into that and working out what everything meant. And this book hinges on an ultra-violent murder, and it famously follows Alex in the aftermath of this as he is put through aversion therapy. This is probably the best dystopian fiction that I have ever read, and I really enjoy following the character of Alex, and this is the first one on the list where I really do like the main character, and I do feel like despite him being a murderer, we are still made in a way to feel for Alex and to want to follow his story. I just think this is a brilliant book, and I think Alex is a brilliant murderous main character. It's a very short book, so if you can get into the different style of writing and language in this, I would highly recommend it. But of course in this one there is, as Alex himself would put it, lashings of ultra violence. So caution again. Even though I have said that is my favourite book of all time, my favourite murderous main character of all time actually goes to a character who's in a relatively long series of books that I have really enjoyed, and that is the Dexter series by Jeff Lindsay. And this one is the first in the series, Darkly Dreaming Dexter, and this is the one I would hugely recommend. Ideally this book series is read in order, and this was first published in 2004 and spawned a much more famous TV series called Dexter. And the Dexter TV series does diverge quite a great deal from the books after from really the end of book one onwards, but I do think that the portrayal of Dexter was really good. I actually enjoyed the Dexter books even more than the television programme. This is the first sort of series of books that I've read that are inside the mind of a serial killer and you still care about him. It's really hard for me not to care about Dexter. He's funny, he's somehow likeable despite the fact that he kills people. So the key principle of Dexter is that Dexter kills bad people, people who have escaped justice, and he has a code in that sense. He describes in the book his dark passenger that makes him kill, I guess. I couldn't get over when reading this how funny Dexter was and how engaging he was, and how he puts a lot of work into his sort of cover-up life as a Miami blood spatter specialist in the Miami police. And yeah, there's some great characters in this, none greater than Dexter in my opinion. Although I think the series probably did tail off a little bit, this one and Dearly Devoted Dexter, the second book in the series, are absolutely fantastically done. And yeah, so Dexter is my top serial killer narrator, my top murderous main character. I do hope you've enjoyed this quick run through today of some murderous main characters in literature and which ones I have really liked following. I don't know what that says about me, but do let me know in the comments. Do you enjoy reading crime fiction, and in particular this subgenre of books where we follow murderers? If you've enjoyed any of these books, do let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And do you have any further recommendations of books that I might like in this sort of genre? Who do you think is a good anti-hero main character, even if they're maybe not so murderous as these guys? If you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do make videos about books here on BookTube on a very regular basis, and I do hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.